Okay, good, thank you.
Some reports that there was some high early voting earlier in the week, and that doesn't really surprise me. I think what everyone's been really surprised by has been the polls over the last couple of weeks. If you go back about 2 or 3 months, it looked as though this election was the Conservatives to lose. It looks like they were running away with it right now. But we've seen what looks to be a very significant swing towards Mark Carney and the Liberals in the last couple of months. Now, it's still relatively close. There are only a couple of points between them, but the Liberal vote is a little more efficient than the Conservative vote is, and so the most expectations are is that the Carney's going to be able to pull this off. Although whether or not that's a majority or not is I still think up in the air. But really, it's coming down to the wire to see how well each one of these two people do. A lot of people have pointed that out. Mark Carney seemed to have a fairly significant lead over the Conservatives even just a couple of days ago. And in the last couple of days, we've seen a little bit of a tightening here between the Liberals and the Conservatives. The implications on that, I think, are still a little unclear. First off, because it's a relatively recent development, so people are still looking at what it is and how real that is. But yeah, I mean, given the electoral system and how tight it is, that could translate into a significant sort of shift in seats depending on how that plays out. I think most people again are expecting the Carney government to be reelected. But it's not impossible that could not happen. It would be a bit of, I think, surprise at this point, but I think it's still possible for the Conservatives to win this. There's been a lot of criticism of Pierre Poilievre for failing to understand the Trump factor, the tariff factor, as being what really is driving this election. And even the supporters have said that Mark Carney seems to have been really better at getting that and running an election on that, and that's really he's been rewarded for doing that. But that said, the Pierre Poilievre focus on sort of affordability and sort of more bread and butter issues, you can say there's maybe that hasn't translated quite as well as they would like. But again, the numbers that he's at suggest that he's run a very good campaign, and he's attracted new voters, younger voters, and in another election, this would be considered, I think, a success. Seen we've seen this in the past, so I think people, it doesn't have quite the same shock value as maybe the first time around, but it is a reminder very much for, I think, for a lot of people about what they're voting for, and they may, this might be a reminder on the way to the ballot box to think carefully about who they make an X for.
I guess the way that support was going for these parties this time was really interesting. I mean, typically we think of conservatives as getting the support of older people in general, right? Older people turn out at greater rates than younger people. So you think like there's a kind of a core conservative vote. But in this election, we actually saw a little bit of the reverse, right? And I mean, if you consider the Liberals to be a left wing party, which they have not always been such, then it would be interesting to say that, it's really the older Canadians, I think, that have flocked to the Liberals. And you can see this in the kinds of advertising they've done, their choice of what kind of ads to put together, who the, like who the celebrities are that are coming out for them, that kind of thing. And so it's kind of an interesting demographic shift that we're not used to. I don't believe necessarily it's the start of any kind of a trend. I think it reflects some other aspects of our politics that are going on. But what this does mean, right, is that if turnout is not super duper high, right, then the conservatives actually might be disadvantaged, where typically we would say that they would have been advantaged. Yeah, but of course, because of our system, right? I mean, all it takes is enough to have 50% plus one seats, right? Like that's the magic. It's not obviously the popular vote that we're worried about in terms of who forms the government. But if any party gets those 172 seats, that gives them, a much stronger position in which to lead for X number of years, at least four, right? Is up to, and is at their choice. Ways they promise the same. This comes down to leadership. And sometimes leadership, in this case, I would say, I don't feel that it's inspiring. I think that's something that Trudeau had. I think he inspired people a little bit more, gave a lot of hope, a lot of energy. I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with the campaign styles of the two front runners this time around, but just more that that's not the messaging that's coming out, right? It's like, how do we get out of this mess that we're in?
No, my goodness.